Howdy, folks. How you guys all doing? Been a hell of a summer for myself. Spent a heck of a lot of time hiking, camping. It's just a lot of enjoyment of the outdoors. It's been mushroom season up in my area, lots of porcinis and chanterelles, and just been having a blast outside. And as a result, I've been letting my reviews slack off, although, as I said, at some point I would always hype stuff that I thought was really special and spectacular. And today we don't have one of those, but we do have the audio Hekili. These are a 7 balanced armature set. Get my hand out of the way. And 1 dynamic driver. They are kind of not really DIY, but like a very small production run. I used to be able to get them off Linsole for about $300. As far as I know, they've been discontinued. But so what do we have? We have a MMCX here, connector. I'm not pulling those off. It's a pain in the ass. I do believe that they are 2-bore. So you got like a big bore there and a small bore right there. And I don't think that little thing on the side there is a bore. It's just part of the design. The back is vented, but it's not actually truly vented to the front. Meaning that, if you put these in your ear with a good strong seal, there's a high likelihood that you're going to get driver crinkling driver flex, which some people hate. Just while I'm on the subject of the build of these, I hate the cable. It's kind of like a nice quality looking cable, but it is janky as hell. It gets caught in knots. Every time I take these out of wherever I have them, I have to unknot this thing, and then it's got let's see if I can show you, but it's got it's janky. It doesn't, it's not a straight weave. It's got curls and kinks in it, and it never goes away, and it always stays kind of just by itself, however it wants to be, and I don't like that. Also, it's a little bit less supple than I enjoy, so it does have some noise transmitted if you're running or doing anything like that, so is what it is. As far as the bore size, they're actually pretty cool. These are little tiny bores here. You should be able to fit mostly any tip. Of course, for me, all my favorite tips are wide bores, so I had to use these little guys. If I try and do something like a comply, these just fall right off. And there's probably some complies I don't own, but that will fit, but they aren't these, so I didn't buy any more. Anyway, all right, so let's look at some specs on these. I should say that they take more power than you would expect for 7 balanced armature, 1 dynamic driver. I assume that the impedance is high, but let's take a quick look. And what do we got? We got, $300, sold out, it says. Well, I guess. I suppose you could get these off of AliExpress if you really wanted to, probably, but I guess they're discontinued. I don't know. But if we go to the specs or product details, 39 ohm. And no sensitivity metrics, but I'll just put it like this. You can run them off of mobile stuff, no problem. They do scale a little bit with higher end amp, but since the impedance is so high, if you just kind of do the divide by 8 rule, that gives us, what are we at? I'm just trying to think. Let's see, 42. Yeah, probably 4 to 5 ohm output impedance would be on your device. In other words, anything below that would probably not change the tonality, and anything above would. But that's more than adequate. Most amps are like that. Most, not all, most. In any case, MMCX, medical grade UV resin, nice. Okay. So here's a graph. And in fact, that's my graph. I graphed it. I got my 711 coupler. One of the things that I do know, talking to folks in Critical and such, is that if you want a graph to be compatible with Critical's graphs, which damn near everyone in the universe does need to have happen, mostly, then we need this little 8K peak to be on the money here, right on the money, and I got that guy on the money. So I believe this was with these tips here, just to let folks know. Generally, I would have used a wider bore tip as I do with most things, but I have literally nothing that'll fit these with a wide bore and actually seal. And like, I'm not going to put a lot of effort into them because I don't like them in the beginning, so whatever. But okay, so there's a graph, and that's with those tips. And then I just thought, well, maybe, because of the fact that these bores are so sort of thin and stuff, you could do this. You could put some 3-flange tips on there, get that kind of thing going on. I tried that, and it's a little better for me. A little, but not enough to make a difference in terms of what I like. And that graph looks like this. And so you can see that we remove a little bit between, say, like 6 and 8K, and then a nice big notch at 10K, which, actually that does seem a little more 3D to my ears. But also getting that 3-flange into the coupler and actually getting the bass that it's supposed to have is like, it's hard. Anyways, that's just something to look at. Cool. Now, I'm just going to go into the reasons why I don't like this that much. And I guess I'll talk about it for a second, but I'll just look at my library. All right, so I started with blues, and if I go through some of those tracks, let's see. We got like Stevie Ray Vaughan, Ry Cooder, Robert Johnson. And like for Stevie Ray Vaughan, what was happening every time was the low end on these, even though they have a dynamic driver, it was not giving me the meat on the bones that I had so desired on Stevie Ray Vaughan. And the guitars had a little bit of a high grading edge to them and less, like I said, less meat. And so really not my favorite. I tried Robert Cray, and it was similarly like the highs were a little bit too much. The lows were not quite enough, and there was just not a lot of meat on the bones. And if we look at the graph here, we can see that here's the thing. This is actually a very, very similar to like the EJ07 styled bass, or mids. It's like 1K. It goes slightly down, and then it goes and pops back up at 200. And here's the problem with that. The problem basically is that this has too much treble and too much pinna to pull that off. And so what ends up happening is this sounds disjointed to my ears. The coherency is not good. I hear bass sort of by itself. I hear not much mid bass, almost nothing. I hear mids that are lacking and uninvolving, but they're okay. They don't have any particular problems with the tonality. And then I hear just too much treble. It's not a lot and it's not overt, but certain tracks, the cymbals will be too loud. Let me go back here. Let's see if I look at stuff. Yeah, Ry Cooder on Crossroads here. And what was it? Feeling Bad Blues. There wasn't enough meat on the bones. The high end was just a little bit too forward, and it just put me off. Paris, Texas, same thing with that. So you get the point. Blues was just like, it's actually one of the better things I heard maybe, but not great. Then we'll move on to classical, and classical was doing a little better. Rodrigo and Gabriela, that's like acoustic. They're from Mexico. They play nylon acoustic guitars. Wasn't bad. But again, like I just felt like I wanted more meat on the bones. It was just a little too thin, maybe. It's hard to put. Okay. Sergio and Assad, they're a duo that plays classical guitar. Really super nice. Actually, I like this album a lot on these. Is quite nice. Tommy Emmanuel, classical gas. And by the way, I have a lot more classical in there. It's not in my main archive. It's when I'm in the classical, I have like a whole nother archive of that, but it's not that often. Wagner. Flight of the Valkyries was claustrophobic. It was hard to pick out instruments. And so speaking of that, the staging on this is not my favorite. It's, for lack of a better word, it is average. It is not particularly wide. It's not particularly deep. It's not bad. Like, I don't know if I talked about like the Theaudio V12. That was extremely flat, but it was wide left to right. Whereas this doesn't have really any of that. It's not flat, and it's really not wide, and it's not really deep, but it's not bad. If that makes sense. So I'd call the staging like average, and for $300, there's better, frankly. Moving on to disco, it was okay. like, disco's kind of like here, neither here nor there, but a lot of this stuff is like 70s mixed and maybe like 80s mixed stuff, and again, less meat on the bones. The high end was a little grating for me. It did put cymbals and some of the percussives ahead of the meat and the potatoes of the mix, which I consider the vocals and some of the other instruments, so not so good. So far we're gonna have like classical is a maybe, blues is a no, disco is maybe, electronica actually is pretty well a big no for me. Too many tracks had too much piercing treble, and especially like if I go to I don't know, Perturbator, that's sort of like, well, it's new like synthwave stuff, and it was just way too piercy, too trebly, not enough meat at all. What else? Knife Party was too much to take. A little claustrophobic. Hong Kong Express, that's actually Vaporwave, but this is a track, this off the album, this. It's a bass track that I usually like to try on stuff, and although this did a decent job, I got other headphones like the S12 that just kill it to death, and you would think like, well, if it's got like, say, a 10 millimeter dynamic driver, why isn't it better? And I don't know, it's just not better. It's like the dynamic driver is leanly tuned, although this graph don't really show that. It seems fine, but nah, to my ears, it just wasn't doing the trick like I wanted it to, so whatever. All right, so then EDM is a no, or electronica, no. Jazz was okay. It tends to be that a lot of jazz stuff is warmly mixed and doesn't have a pushed, high end. That's just like sort of sultry jazz, that's kind of like the style of the recording. So this actually did pretty good. The more meat and potatoes on the mixes translated to a little more in the headphones, which was nice. So we'll give jazz a pass, pretty nice. Metal was pretty much a no, absolutely not. The problem with metal is essentially in this range right here. It's this part right in here, the mids, it's just dipped out too much. The bass is too high. So what we end up is pretty much a big V shape here, although you might call it a W, I suppose. But the point I'm trying to make is for metal, this is just way too sucked out in the meat and potatoes of the mixes, and it was a little fatiguing also. There is a little too much treble in this range for me, and that's just with normal tips. I really like that to be dipped out more, as people probably know. And moving on to, we got metal, let's just do R&B. R&B was pretty okay. I didn't really have any problems with that for what it's worth, so we'll give that a go. Reggae was not okay. And oddly enough, it was too piercy, too much treble, and not enough bass. And like it just doesn't make any sense to me. And I did try this on a bunch of amps. I got my Burson Playmate 2, Mo 2, Mark 5, using the ES100 and my phone, and I got other stuff, and none of it did well. So it is what it is. Reggae was just not doing it for me. Not enough meat at all. And, a lot of this reggae stuff was mixed back in the 70s and 80s for sure. And so it kind of follows the mixes from that era, just to make that point. And again, I don't know why this doesn't have more bass than it shows. If I pull up on my graph something that does have more bass than I can even imagine, where am I here? Short bus. This is the Prometheus mod. So here's the point of what I'm trying to make with that. The Prometheus mod has, yes, it has a lot more bass starting at, what is this, like 800 or something? I don't know, 600. But the actual energy amount is much less than Hekili. It's overall, and so is the Pinna over here. And, in the end of the day, the Prometheus just blows the Hekili into next week in bass stuff. And I'm not talking about mid-bass. I'm talking about all of the bass. It's just a totally different replay. And I'll just say this real quick. It's probably too much. Most of my friends are just getting smashed by the bass on the Prometheus mod, and I get it. I don't know if I'm going to change it, but I get it. All right, moving on. We got rock and roll. Rock and roll did pretty good, actually, oddly. You just got stuff like, AC/DC. Tool was okay. I wouldn't call it wonderful. Just looking around here. Creedence. Earth, Wind, Fire was okay. I would like a little more meat and potatoes on the bones, honestly, for a lot of this stuff, but it did come off pretty okay. So, and speaking of that, I think Hawaii Bad Boy was hyping the set, and I get it. This is probably a majority of his library, and did really well. So cool. Soundtracks, it did pretty okay on, give or take. Some of these were a little out of the ballpark, but in general, I liked it, so we'll give a pass on the OST soundtracks. Vaporwave was good. I'm going to give it pretty much a pass on that. All this stuff sounded quite good. I don't really know why compared to everything else, but I'm not overthinking it. Good stuff. Vintage and Lounge, about half and a half. So like Buena Vista Social Club, the vocals on that were a little bit too high-centric and a little less meat in the chestiness of the voices. But, overall, we got a bunch of stuff in here. I liked it quite a bit. Anything else that matters? Marvin Gaye was good. Louis Armstrong was not good. Django Reinhardt was fine. Yeah, so on and so forth. So, I wish that I could. Now, look, John, I tried everything I could. I tried every device I could. I spent time. I gave myself better days, better ear days, worse ear days, and at the end of the day, I fucking hate these. I'm so sorry, dude. But thank you for sending me them. I'll send them back now. Honestly, making this review was just painful. I hate making bad reviews, and I know that you sold off a lot of things and you love these, and I think with your library they do work better than other stuff. A lot of the live recorded stuff that you listen to is better on this because the extra bit of treble really does help set that stuff off. I have no idea how the bass is really doing so well for you, but I suppose if it does well for you, it does well for you, man. I don't have an RME DAC amp like Hawaii Bad Boy, and also John has one, Bucky. But I'm hoping that isn't the big difference. I'm certainly not going to be rating a $300 set of headphones only on a $1,200 amp. I mean, I get where you guys are coming from, but I can't do that. So is what it is. So in the end, cable fail. Fit is fine. Doesn't work with my library at all, and I don't recommend it. Have a great day.